Oh, you want to know what's going on? Does everybody hear that? Cody wants to know what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. It's a little after 2200 and the live debate, or the Libertarian debate just ended, and we are live on the Brushfire Mind, and that's what's going on. We have been up for about 3 seconds now. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Brushfire Mind. I'm Christopher Lowry. I've got Steve Rodemeyer, Cody McKinney, Cameron Anderson, and Cade Robinson online with us, and we're going to be talking about the Libertarian debate that just ended. Wow, was that an eye-opener?
In more ways than one.
So,
Yes.
Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot, brother. I'm going to throw the ball at you and say, tell me about Gary Johnson.
That's not the same Gary Johnson from 4 years ago. I was actually kind of taken aback at a couple of his stances because that's not at all what was argued last time. So I'll back my support off of him a little bit till he gets his feet back under him. As far as the other two, reading the news reports and things that had been coming out over the last several months about Mcafee, those news reports aren't the profile of the guy that I saw tonight. I thought he delivered really well. He didn't feel plastic. It seemed like he was thinking it through while he was talking. I know we've all got some opinions on Peterson as far as that goes. That was my first exposure to him as well, other than blurbs.
Yeah,
Do you want me to give my take on it now, or shall we wait and let this build and let's go over this one by one? It's up to you guys.
no, we could get to
The Plastic Wonder Kid Libertarian.
The Plastic Wonder Kid works.
You heard what Stossel said.
In my notes.
Stossel said, the only problem I have with you is you're 12.
And
I thought he
probably
pretty much
get it
knew.
out there. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. I did like him, though. I honestly did like him. I think he says a lot of great things, and he says it in a wonderful 1930s way, and his hand gestures are just perfect, and he can really bring you in. But he's going to find out there's a lot of problems when he actually gets higher up in Washington. And I think he's going to learn some lessons, and that may be the difference between the Gary Johnson, Steve, that you talked about seeing 4 years ago versus a Gary Johnson now. He's probably got kind of a bitterness thing going on, and he's learned some lessons. He's had to play the game. He's been in there, whereas Mcafee and Peterson are fresh. I could listen to Mcafee talk all day long. It's fabulous. And I mean, he's somebody Caroline found online compared him to a white Barry White, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. I'm totally for that. But I don't know how well Mcafee or Peterson would actually work when they actually have to play with others. And that's something that Gary Johnson has done. He may not have been the most impressive of the three, but it's something on the state level, granted. He has not had to play in Washington as yet. But he's got a little bit more experience, and I think his answers were a little tempered because of that. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think you're far off. I think that's probably a lot of it. He has been in the game more than the other two, especially this not being his first presidential run either. But it's weird to see the stance shift quite that much, or at least the projected parts of his stance. Such as the bit, he flopped just this year from the, what was the point? I had it in my head, and then everybody started joining, and I got confused. Quick, somebody take over the dead air.
Strangers
Okay, so,
in the night.
I'll pop in on that then. You guys know I'm a big sticker on foreign policy, and like I've said many times before, and I'm liking Trump for a lot of reasons. I do like the idea, at least as an intellectual exercise, of a third party. I have some serious logistical concerns about what a permanent third party would mean to the election cycle of this country going forward. But the debate that we just watched, if anything, just reiterated to me that as libertarians, they fail miserably on foreign policy, and largely because they demonstrated a very clear failure to grasp what is actually going on in our war situation right now. When Mcafee started talking about the intelligence process and all that stuff, and how You're not seeing attacks in Russia and China on this because their intelligence is better and they've got a better cyber intelligence command. That's not the case. That's not why we're not seeing attacks there. We're not seeing big attacks by Muslim terrorists in China and Russia because they're not the targets of these terrorists currently, because they are not the people that these terrorists are actively declared against. The nation, the Islamic State, they are declared against the United States. They're not even declared as active war against the European nations that they're currently invading. Those are a strategic maneuver, but their stated objective is to invade and destroy the United States. So, alongside that, Russia and China both have a history of doing terrible, terrible, dirty war stuff to terrorists that our sloppy, floppy, fucking squishy liberals over here call torture. And they're wrong. They're as wrong as they could be on that. So, basically, I loved everything I heard out of these candidates, especially Mcafee, except for the fucking foreign policy stuff. They're just 180 degrees wrong on foreign policy.
You know what, Chris? I want Steve to tackle that, but it was a legitimate concern when I was watching it, and I will say, because that really just rubbed me the wrong way because of what you're saying, and I knew you would have an opinion on it because you've been over there killing terrorists, and I wanted to hear your take on that. But this is also one of those things, going back to what I said about Peterson and Mcafee, that I believe the same thing of Gary Johnson having not been tested in Washington as yet. That is one of those things that they say now, but the one good thing I can say about that is when they get in there and they learn something, it's going to be similar to Obama in 2008 saying, I'm going to get in there and the first thing I'm going to do is bring all of our troops home. And then he got in there and he learned what was actually happening. And we had as many troops over there as we did under Bush. So you learn lessons as you get there. So some of the things that they said that were scary, like foreign policy, it scared me as well. I'm with you 100%. But I do think those are adaptability things more than anything else. And it's not enough to make me not vote for them because they're going to be up there with 100 other Democrats and Republicans constantly all around them. They're not going to be able to get away with saying, you know what, everybody just light up a joint and we're just, we're not going to protect ourselves. We'll be fine. It's just not going to happen. So,
well, let me tag that for just a second.
Sure.
Herman Cain, when he was running back in 12, he was hit with the question, what is your strategy for Afghanistan? And he answered straight up. He said, I don't have one. It's this simple. I have not yet had a chance. I have not been allowed yet to have a conversation with the Joint Chiefs, with the generals in command on the ground, with the soldiers that are fighting over there right now. I do not have enough information to develop a strategy on that. That is something that I will do when I've been allowed access, when I have the access to the intelligence information and the higher level information. So with all three of these guys, each one of them took a stand based on an absolute ignorance of what the war is.
I agree. One of them could have said that, and I would have felt so much better had one of them said what you just said, quoting Herman Cain. I think that's the right answer. That's the right answer.
Hey, I'm telling you, man. I called Herman after he dropped out of the race that year and started filling in for Neil Bortz before he took over full time. Steve heard me on the radio when we had this conversation. I called him and talked to Herman Cain, and I said,
"I'm car for a parts run. Turn on the radio," and Chris is in my radio.
And I said, Herman, I voted for you in the primary, and I wanted nothing more than to hear you walk across the stage and say to Barack Obama in a primary debate, brother, I'm 100%. Ain't no cream in my coffee. I will be America's first black president. I said that to Herman Cain on the air on WSB.
Still funny.
2012.
Still funny. Every time I hear it. Every time I hear it, it's still funny.
Cameron, I haven't heard enough out of you yet. And I know you've got some shit to sling.
I really had three major takeaways from the debate. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It was actually fascinating to have a moderator like John Stossel really press people on what does that mean? Where is the line for a libertarian where the government steps in and does the necessary evil on this issue and so forth and so on? That being in mind, I feel like Mcafee had the best line of the night when he said, you know, if I don't sell you anything, do I hurt you? And I really felt like he so very much encapsulated the libertarian attitude when he said, okay, there you go, Cameron, just drop everything. He so well encapsulated the libertarian attitude when he said, you know, could you just go shop somewhere else if you wanted to? Why would you even want to shop at a place that was bigoted if you really felt that way? And then later on, when he said, you know, okay, fine, if you don't like the way your employer treats you, quit. Go work somewhere else. You don't have to work there. And again, I felt like he was the strongest of the night. Gary Johnson blew my mind with the I would force people to bake a wedding cake answer. That was my second big takeaway. I did not expect that answer out of him. You really could have turned me upside down. I don't know how to say it without just going into total hyperbole. And then my third big... Go ahead.
Let me interrupt on that one real quick. I found that especially interesting because my counter to the debate on RFRA, you guys know me, I don't give a shit about the gay marriage thing. I'm not for it or against it. It's an irrelevant issue as far as I'm concerned. I actually more or less feel the same way about RFRA for primarily the same reasons. And we can talk a little more about that later. It is something that I do want to discuss at some point because there was a big deal with the Georgia Restoration of Religious Freedom Act and the way that it was vetoed. And that's something I want to have a conversation about. But
the evil Disney intimidated our governor into vetoing the bill. Yeah, that was kind of spooky.
That later. But my response on the it's all about hate and that bill is there so that people can discriminate against gays and blah blah blah. Okay, no. Okay, so if you could force a baker at gunpoint to bake a cake for somebody he doesn't want to bake a cake for, are you going to force a Jew at gunpoint? Can I walk into a Jewish deli in my jack boots and swastika brown coat and demand pastrami on rye and expect it to be served to me at gunpoint against their will? That's the question. Because if either your argument is for absolute equal protection under the law, or your argument is that the Supreme Court is now allowed to assign special privileges to specific interest groups. So you can't have it both ways, which is the problem with the left. They're inherently dichotomous.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that's I'm with Cameron. Me being the Gary Johnson supporter that I have been, that one really. He held with it. It was something that came out several months ago that he said, and he stuck by it, which I think may have been almost a misstep that now he's having to defend rather than backpedal, which I'm not sure I understand either. But I want to watch that over again and watch his face as he says it, because it looks like he was begging for how he was going to respond to that. That part made me uncomfortable. The rest of the answers, you know, I've heard his stuff before. I kind of knew where the rest of it was. That one really blew me away. But I'm with Chris on that. I'm glad that the bill that was here got shot down. Just because, like you said, it's not an issue. And Deal said it himself. These are not things we've had to deal with in Georgia. There's no precedent for us to treat.
So we just wait till some baker in Georgia is fined $100,000 fucking by some civil rights group because they don't want to bake a cake for a homosexual wedding?
No. Let's get back to the debate questions for a little bit.
Okay, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had.
By the way, did everybody read Riffer this week? That was the homework assignment. It was 7.5 pages, so don't tell me it was too much fucking bill.
Man, honestly, I hadn't read anything this week.
But
Dear
Chris,
sweet fuck.
Chris, we don't have to get on this now, but please remind me the death penalty issue. I had a problem with, and we need to talk about that. It was skipped over very, very quickly. It was in the lightning round. And
Okay, and I came downstairs during the commercial break right before that, and I tried to pull it up on Fox News on the on one of the big boards in the fucking HQ here, and for some reason the audio wasn't coming through. I missed that whole chunk. I missed the whole fucking death penalty.
I
really wanted to hear it.
All it was, do you agree with the death penalty? And all three of them said no.
Okay, they've just lost my vote.
And McAfee said it's barbaric. And I disagree.
And he's an idiot. If you cannot value life and oppose the death penalty.
Now, here's the thing, though. Here's why that didn't lose me the vote is because, like everything else with the Libertarian Party, it is going to be smaller federal government and states' governments doing what they will. So I don't see Gary Johnson, John McAfee, or Austin Peterson actually telling Texas, as Ron White said, you got to get rid of that speed lane to the death.
Express lane.
Express lane, right.
No, you look at it this way, guys. How many times have we heard over and over again, and not that they aren't all, don't get me wrong, but how often have we seen innocent people held on death row? How many times have innocent people, after they've been killed, been found, oh, yeah, they really didn't do it. Oops. And you can say what you want to about, collateral damage, whatever that way. That's where the stance comes from. It's protecting the innocent. That's why the law works the way it does in the court. The guilty have an advantage, and you have to prove their guilt. The advantage is not with the innocent in a courtroom. If they're innocent, I mean, you have to convince people. If you're guilty and you hide stuff well enough, you'll be seen as innocent.
A bad lawyer should not.
No, you have. Hang on. You have an extraordinary advantage if you are innocent, because in order to prove guilt, especially in the case of the death penalty, it is guilt beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt, and that is very difficult to prove without legitimate evidence. Now, to the point about executing the innocent, you hear every single story possible about that coming to pass, but take a moment and consider this. How many death penalties are carried out in the United States anymore? How many people were actually executed by a state last year? 12?
Okay, so why do we need a death penalty if we're not killing people anyway?
Oh, no, we need to expand the death penalty. We're not killing enough people.
I want to hear Cameron on that.
In my heart, I really agree with Chris. I think we need to expand the death penalty. I really, really do. But in my head, as I look at how much money it costs, for example, to give somebody a death penalty trial, it's not that I think that the death penalty is immoral or barbaric. I do not. I do not. But when you start from a libertarian position, how can I shrink government reasonably, make it run more efficiently? Well, if you just accept that somebody is a total piece of shit and is never going to come out of the hole you put them in, then that's what you do, and you get rid of the death penalty, and you go ahead and still call things a capital crime. You just don't execute the person. Maybe we set up some freaking island and we just drop people off there and they have their own community. I don't know. But
the increased cost anyway. So if you look at Texas and how they instituted the express lane, Texas's institution of the express lane requires a certain level of understanding that multiple people essentially saw you commit that act. So there's not a question there. And if you put that precedence upon the expansion of the death penalty, where you have cases that are only brought into that realm with irrefutable evidence, then you expedite that entire process. If you expand it across, inevitably it will become cheaper. The other thing you can do to mitigate the cost of the death penalty is stop charging so much to kill people.
That's what I'm thinking. Start taking
Wow. The tactical Trump monkey is on fucking point. You're right.
How much does it cost to throw a 223 or a 5.56 range?
Yeah, no. I'd say keep it cheaper. The death penalty might as well be carried out with a toaster and a bed sheet. I'm totally comfortable with that.
Chris, let me make one point.
Nothing barbaric about that at all.
How much?
That's one shot, one kill. Too easy. Sorry, Cade, you take over.
There's lag or something, so I don't think anything's funny because I didn't understand what anyone just said. So
I said for cost effectiveness, we should carry out the death penalty with a toaster and bed sheet. Steve said that might be barbaric. I said it's one shot, one kill.
Now, Cameron went right in the middle of it. It sounded like a monkey masturbating. I missed what you said all over again. Just tell me later offline. I'm sure it's hilarious.
Toaster and a bed sheet. Cheap death penalty.
Nice. All right, I'm with it. All right. Now, here's the thing, though. If we're talking about money, if we're talking about how much something costs for lethal injection or whatever, how much does it cost to feed and shelter and clothe the person that's got life in prison, which is
approximately $50,000 per year.
It doesn't have to.
No, it doesn't.
Well, what costs more then? Wouldn't keeping someone alive, if they get charged at 25 years old and keeping them in prison for life, wouldn't that be a hell of a lot cheaper just to kill them?
That's the other thing.
Not if they planted corn or stamped license plates or whatever.
Even if they do that, there's two ways to attack this issue, right? So you institute a workforce within the prison system, number one, so that we're not paying so much per person. But,
yeah, and you give the prisoners that are willing to work hard for it a reward for doing so. Sure.
Wait, Cameron, let Cody run, because this might be a soundbite.
But we also need to get rid of the ridiculously absorbent rights and fucking privileges that prisoners have. You're in fucking prison. You're there for a reason, and that reason is not to get entertainment or all this fucking fiction bullshit. If you're on a life sentence, there should be life prisons where you go and you work for the rest of your fucking life, and I get as much value out of you because you have displayed that as an individual functioning in our society, you are incapable of producing. So if you can't do that in a free environment, I will put you in a contained environment, and I will capitalize off of your ass. If you can't play right with the rest of the crowd, I will isolate you, and I will ensure that you produce. If I can't do that, then I fucking take you out back and I put a round in your head because you're no use to society.
Well, and Cody, you haven't known me as long as you guys have.
That deserves a slow clap. Let it build, Chris. Just let it happen.
There you go. Now, Cody, you haven't known me quite as long as these other guys have. But the boys may remember when Cameron and Cade and I were in high school, and Steve was already old. I wrote a paper. Kind of vis-a-vis Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal, where obviously he suggested that we should start eating Catholic children to solve the potato famine and population problems in Ireland. And it was supposed to be satire. It was satire. It was intended to be funny and shocking and to make his point. I wrote a paper.
It was funny.
It was actually fucking hilarious. But I wrote a similar paper about basically converting the American prison system into pay-per-view broadcast gladiatorial arenas. You guys remember that shit?
No.
Yep.
I didn't hear about any of this.
We used to talk about that at great length before you wrote that paper.
Yep.
Just like some death race kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it had so many facets. You could go so many ways.
Oh, yeah. At one point, we even considered adding basically circumstantially forced cannibalism. You know, just don't feed the prisoners. You eat what you kill.
Good grief.
The entire system is funded by pay-per-view pay-per-view watching, and you just let them go at it.
Then if you do
Now,
the
for the viewers, I will reiterate, this was written as satire. Thank you.
So, okay, is the death penalty barbaric? And even if the death penalty is not barbaric, is it necessary for a libertarian to hold to the fact that the death penalty is barbaric? Because once you deprive someone of their life, they can no longer pursue liberty or happiness. It is the fundamental right that we all have.
You gave up your ability to do that when you became, and in the case, and this is why I refer so heavily back to how Texas has instituted this. If we're going to play in the death penalty realm, we need to make absolutely sure that we do everything we can to minimize the error ratio. Now, am I saying that there's not going to be errors? No, with any given system presented at large scale, there's going to be issues. But if we approach it from the standpoint that it's already been approached within Texas, we don't have to worry about issues like that. And it's not barbaric. It's necessary in order to instill within a society that every individual member will be afforded those rights, and the individuals that will not adhere to that standard are removed from that society.
Yes, Chris and I have had that exact conversation before, and I've tried to make the point that the people who look at it as something barbaric and some sort of a punishment or some sort of a cruel act visited upon a person, that's not what it is. It is a prophylactic measure. This person has proven that they have the ability and the will and the intent to take the life of another human being. They must be removed from this earth so that they may not take another. That is the purpose of the death penalty. Whether you agree with it or not, that is its purpose.
Oh, I agree with it with my heart.
It's simple. Dead rapists don't rape people, dead murderers don't murder people, and dead terrorists don't blow up fucking buildings. It's easy math. That's why the Democrats have a hard time with it. It's easy math.
That's why everybody should carry a 9mm. There'd be a lot more dead rapists and dead terrorists and dead killers.
I'm thinking having a more proactive populace would help. And another thing that,
absolutely,
like we've already said, we arrest people who have been mass murderers, who have been serial rapists, and we don't kill them. You let them sit, you let them sit, you let them sit, you let them sit. Nobody seems to have a problem with that. We're still only killing 12 a year, and people aren't picketing out there, kill more prisoners, which is probably for the best, really. But if we're only killing 12 a year anyway, the difference you could do, even cutting costs down from $50,000 a prisoner to something more reasonable, like say, I don't know, $10 a month. Minimize the food they get. They can wear whatever hand-me-down stuff that the last prisoner left them. Whatever. It is punishment. I agree with that.
They can learn to sew.
There you go. Weave, maybe. I don't know. But it's a textile mill in a prison. It works. But see, you'd be really easier than anybody, Cameron. The flip side of that being, if you also end the drug war, you get rid of minor drug offenders. You cut the prison population by 30%.
Yes.
Then you have more money available to not have to kill those other 12. And if you are in a case of a non-rehabilitative person, period, some people, you can just tell that the hamster's been dead, but the wheel's still turning. Maybe there's another way to deal with that. I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to have all the answers. That's why the people get a say, right? Because none of us know what's best for everybody.
Incidentally, there were 28 executions last year.
What state had the most?
Probably Texas.
I don't think so.
There have been 10 this year. We had one today, apparently, in Georgia.
Really?
Yep.
Popular news.
Yeah.
But, okay, and we need to statistics for how many people are on death row with an execution pending. Not counting appeals and all that, but how many people are waiting on that? Several thousand?
Damn it, man, I can only Google so fast.
Oh, no. It was just simply hypothetical. That would be the next necessary number. We're killing such a small percentage of people that we're saying deserve to die. We're not doing anything about it anyway. Now, I'm all for the person in the act of trying to rape someone being shot. But I also understand people have gone to prison from false accusations of rape.
Well, that's why. So again,
2,943 on death row as of January 1st this year. Sorry.
Okay.
So
1%.
I really was just trying to. I'm just trying to ask the question in terms of, like, as a libertarian. It's not that, like, I'm actually okay with the death penalty. I used to work with a guy named Clay Ellington, and I hated Clay, and made no bones about the fact that I hated Clay. I thought he was a shithead. Didn't understand why more people did not see that Clay was a shithead. And about a year after I left that job, Clay was on the news because he had beat his entire family to death with a hammer. And I remember holding a little boy named Cameron. And I don't know, it's like, okay, death penalty, there you go. That's why we have it. He doesn't know. Okay, that's what you want to do. You want to kill your own kids. Goodbye. I mean,
Episode maybe, but another one.
Yeah, no, and I understand. It's something I struggle with. It's like the whole immigration thing that I struggle with for so long anyway. I know everyone's got all these staunch stances and things. I tend to be a little bit more fluid. I tend to think more about what actually sits well with me, not just what the popular manly line about things happens to be, which does guide quite a few people. But in the case of the death penalty, I could see the arguments for both sides. I carry a gun. I'm not above killing bad people. The catch is, with the holes that we've got in our criminal justice system, are there reforms that make it a more sure thing that innocent people don't go to prison and wind up dead for something they didn't do?
is the Neil Bort's DRT theory really superior? If the bad guy's dead right there, well then it's pretty clear what happened.
Yeah. I carry a gun. If I see something like that or something somebody intends harm to me, DRT is an absolute policy of mine, and hopefully I'm not the one with the acronym. But the main thing is, you're talking about something on site. I know I'm being attacked. Okay, while a jury is an absolute must-to-have in such a situation, lawyers make cases in court, not the victim of the crime or the perpetrator, depending on who's on which side of what there. So it's not as easy a black and white thing as the actual confrontation because of the language that's going to be used, the obfuscation and everything else to make one side or the other look better. Typically, the accuser has the weight of proof. But on the other hand, there are an awful lot of ways defense attorneys get away with a lot of shit. So at that point, there's a whole different area between how someone winds up in prison and how someone winds up dead in a parking garage.
Look, if it comes down to the point, and I think anybody that actively carries will understand this, if it comes to the point where you have to draw a weapon to neutralize a threat, that's a binary thing. It's a 1 or a 0. You've either crossed that line or you haven't. If you haven't crossed that line, then we take it to a courtroom and we observe it from that level. If you have crossed that line, then you're going to get neutralized. That's the long and short of it for me. The issue that I see with the prison population as a whole is the system that is built to ensure justice is enacted in a courtroom has gone from something to do just that to almost a profit-like system where we are able to extort money from people because, I don't know, it's not that bad of a crime, and we've got laws on the books that put people in jail for 5 years for fucking weed. It's legal in some states. So if you go back to the drug issue, get rid of the drug penalty. Let natural selection sort it out. Tax it and treat it like a luxury. I mean,
your heroin addiction is punishment enough.
Yeah, that was a beautiful address, I thought.
What people are going to subject themselves to in the form of drug use, if you're going to take it to such an extreme level, then yeah, do that to yourself. Now I don't have to pay for you to sit in prison and rehabilitate yourself. You'll rehabilitate yourself on the fucking fly.
if the federal government gets rid of drug laws, as I think they should, can states step in? Could the state of Georgia step in and say, methamphetamine has proven to be a danger above and beyond what a normal intoxicant poses as a risk? We're not trying to create a class of drugs. We're trying to attack a specific problem on the state level.
I would think, Cameron, that does follow state sovereignty. I think that would have to be left to a public vote and let the states decide for themselves. Honestly, how else do you treat that? Can you ban anyone from that? I don't know. That's a very good constitutional question. Because it's no longer interstate commerce. It doesn't fall under the government at any part of the umbrella at that point, except maybe the public welfare clause, depending on the bastardization of that term like they usually do.
Yeah, no shit. Nothing that falls under the Commerce Clause under federal law currently is really legitimately an application of the Commerce Clause as it's phrased, as it's framed, and as it was explained in the writings and the letters of the founders. The Commerce Clause, as it's applied today, is an absolute fucking mutation.
Agreed. But it just trying to stay on point there. I think
we just hit 5 viewers.
Yeah. Hey. I think that would be something. If we determine that the federal government can no longer do it, I think we'd have to leave it to the states to decide how it's treated. Can we legalize it all and consider all of it legal amounts? Can we decriminalize certain possession levels? I'm not sure how you treat that, but I think it's a good conversation to have.
Regulate it like
from a constitutional perspective. From a constitutional perspective, there really is no option but to legalize everything.
That's true.
Keep in mind, the prohibition of alcohol required, and absolutely correctly required, an amendment, the 19th Amendment, and for that to be repealed when it was finally realized that, oh my God, prohibition, like all law, causes more crime.
Yeah.
And that required another amendment to repeal.
I want to bring up another perspective for the legalization of the drug thing. So, from a perspective of security, in terms of cartel strength. So, one of the reasons that the cartels are so strong and able to circumvent so much legal interdiction in other countries is because the amount of revenue that the black market for drugs generates. So one of the other perspectives that I like to look at is how much power am I taking away from my enemies in the terms of cartels, in the terms of funding terrorists, in the terms of basically just eliminating a revenue stream to be used for, I'll say, nefarious purposes. If I legalize in a society that is probably the leading purchaser of that product on a black market, what effect is that going to have against other bad guys, terrorists, cartels? If I'm taking away that revenue stream, then I'm not spending as much money to combat cartel bleed over into the states.
And they've already noticed that, at least just because of Colorado and Washington.
Well, even beyond that, if you look at South America, what was it? Venezuela that legalized drugs. I don't know the exact country that did it, but there was a country that went out and legalized drugs, and their ability to circumvent the effect that the cartels have in that area was massive.
Yep.
Well, you're making an even bigger point because
quick, Cody. You were talking about basically attacking the drugs from the perspective of a revenue source, destroying a revenue source that funds and ultimately empowers our enemies. Let me ask you, when you were in Helmand Province, did you ever have the distinct privilege, like I did in the East Jari district, did you ever get to walk through the massive Afghani pot fields?
No, because down by where I was at in Helmand, they had gone through in the early stages and burnt all of those crops.
See, in East Jari, we weren't allowed to burn the crops, so we walked through, I shit you not, we walked through cannabis plant farms where it was nothing but cannabis plants, 50, 80, 100 acres, 12 and 14 feet tall. And then when they came to harvest, they were gone. Just the whole thing, ripped it all down, and it went away. And I was there right at the end of the season when they first harvested it. Because Cody and I were basically there from midsummer to midsummer, July 20th to July 20th. So I was there as they harvested it all away, and then I was still there when they replanted. And it's amazing how fast those fucking plants get taller than a man, a big man.
Yeah.
And it's a huge revenue stream. It's funding the grenades and candy bars that it takes to turn 5-year-old children into murder machines.
And it's also being used to manipulate the minds of the people that are being subjected to the captors in that area. They're using derivatives of those drugs in order to control the masses. If you look at ISIS, they addict people with fucking pills that are synthesized from this shit.
Well, there's an even bigger point. We are the richest country in the world. We can have our vices and we can afford them. If suddenly they're no longer illegal, the mafia only exists because it was the only place you could buy whiskey and beer.
Yeah,
otherwise,
everyone's willing to take the chance to supply it. That's right.
And it's the same reason illegal drug pushers exist in the way they do now. As soon as the richest country in the world is no longer a market for black market drugs, it will create massive instability amongst the cartels. A lot of our enemies, in that sense, from the sense Cody was talking about, will turn on each other, and they'll sort of cannibalize each other, and it will be much easier to contain whatever threat remains from that point forward. And it would give us so much stronger of a footing all the way down the South American continent in dealing with those governments from this point forward, because we would solve all of their biggest fucking problems. All of their governments are corrupt because they're trying to keep the supply train of drugs flowing north to us, because we're going to keep smoking and keep snorting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, none of it has ever been curbed. All it did was create an entirely new class of inmate with the severe level of nonviolent offenders.
Not only that, you're talking about pushing out people who would have gone in as nonviolent offenders, and now they're exposed to prison life for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of citizens are they going to be when they come out?
Well, because they can't get decent jobs because nobody wants to hire a felon. They can't do a lot of things. Can't vote. Can't guns. Can't. Yeah, you have. Oh, this drug will ruin your life. Then they go to prison, come out, and their life's been ruined. Where otherwise, all they'd have had was a buzz.
And now they have to kill to. Well, at least in their mentality, they have to kill to take things.
Or even if not, they're still having to work 2 menial labor jobs or something in order to make enough money to do the things that they want to do. Which, yeah, I could see, somebody who's doing that, breaking a law, having to do things to work themselves out of it. But you're talking a nonviolent offender. It was a victimless crime. Yeah. He was going to get a little bit high, and they put him in jail for it.
Yep.
That's why his life.
He was going to get mind-numbingly out of his gourd high. So what?
Yeah.
Right. Don't put him in jail for it.
So, Steve, you said victimless crime.
Yeah.
First lesson in law school: crime is harm. A victimless crime, by definition, is not a crime. Right. And in every case that a law creates a crime, the argument, if there is not a clear victim, if the law is something other than thou shalt not murder because there's a clear victim there, the argument will always be that the victim is society itself. And that argument falls flat the fuck on its face every single time. The victim of drugs is society itself. When you introduce a prohibition state like we're talking about, and all of a sudden your society is being subject to the terror reign of a fucking organized crime syndicate in a black market. And now all of a sudden your police forces are beholden to the corruption of the bribe states, and prohibition causes crime.
Yep. And that's another thing. If we're looking at systematically destroying our enemies, If you, one, isolate the revenue stream, the internal friction that that creates within an organization will cause that structure to faction. And that is and essentially what I'm trying to get at is that is the point where an organization starts to fail. If you look at the LTTE in Sri Lanka, they were taken down because they began to faction. When they were operating under the complete ridiculous amount of rule that they had, they were able to fight off legitimate amounts of governments because they were unified in their control. But once they started to faction off into individual sections with their own beliefs under a subset, that allowed different forces to come in and take them out. Now, the methods that were used to take those people out in and of themselves were completely barbaric, and I say that as a war fighter. So that should show you some level of respect to the ridiculous atrocities that were committed to remove that organization from the planet. But if we're taking all the public attention on drugs right now, to me seems to be a red herring that distracts the public from focusing on other issues that we need to take care of in the terms of what harm is a crime doing to society. And one of the biggest weapons, and my fear is we're catching it entirely too late, one of the biggest weapons that people use to cause damage to the American society is economics. If you look at the effect that the corporate environment and the financial environment had on society after the housing crisis, and you look at the punishment that was levied against those individuals, it's completely fucking unbalanced in the sense of justice. Completely fucking unbalanced. Yet, I've got a guy that has a fucking dime bag spending 5 years in jail, and the guys that masterminded the entire plot behind lending to lend for a fucking loan are walking around free. Now, how the fuck is that even close to fair?
Mm-hmm. I've got nothing to add to that, Cody.
No. Cody's way too good at this. When he's done, I just sit back and just
Okay,
go back to the
tell you what.
clap thing.
Cody, I appreciate the shit out of your quixotic dedication to the obliteration of our state's enemies because, well, quite frankly, it's been 5 years this month since the last time I shot a bad guy, and
Getting itchy too, Chris.
I'm starting to wonder if I can still get an erection anymore. I'd love to get back out there and fight the fight. But and you're right. So many of the issues that we discuss do relate back to foreign policy and national security on a level, especially when you start talking about things like black market trades. And really, I don't think I can go any further in supporting your point without basically just repeating everything that you said.
The only thing that wasn't touched on was simply the other facet of it, like the purposeful devaluation of a nation's currency like China does to be sure they can undercut us and still make money for themselves by them driving.
I think I loved once Mcafee started railing on China as the enemy, China this, China that, and I started actually, as soon as he started saying that, my very first thought, I shit you not, and I thought I had meant to text it to you guys as we were watching the show. My first thought was, can I get a Trump Mcafee ticket?
Oh, Jesus.
Who do I have to strangle?
Me?
For a Trump Mcafee ticket?
See, so another issue to expand upon with the enemy there that McAfee brought up is the cybersecurity realm. So I'll go ahead and chime in on that point real quick. If we take that same mentality and look at what is being done currently against the business sector, the financial sector, even certain sectors of the government in the terms of cybersecurity, the sheer amount of fuckery that is coming from these guys, and we're continuing to do business with them. This is ridiculous. We need to reindustrialize ourselves so we are not dependent upon foreign manufacturers to produce goods. A, that will fix a job problem within our own country, but B, it attributes to the same idea of taking apart an organization by factioning it after you isolate its revenue stream. So you want to hit our enemies where it hurts, hit them in their fucking wallets, because that's all they seem to care about. So isolate their revenue stream, take away the demand for their product within our society, and then we don't have to fucking worry about this shit, and we can get back to business like schwacking bad guys that need to be fucking schwacked across the world.
Well, and that is one point that Gary Johnson made that was actually was the fact of removing the revenue stream from the enemies as being part of the war on them, where we're not carpet bombing and we're not droning families. Because we all know, yeah, hearts and minds, two in the heart, one in the mind, yeah, you know, that's when it's needed. But you still, if you've got a nation of people against you, you cannot go in and kill them all. Not if you expect anything to stop, unless you're going to actually kill them all. Then you have to deal with the rest of the world. And I don't know that anybody's in a very good position to handle that.
We don't even need to take it to that perspective, because again, going back to the Sri Lankan conflict, look at what the Sri Lankan government did to the LTTE. Now, granted, as it started, they were basically a bastardized sect of the society. It had had enough, and they were attempting to create a resistance. The problem is, when they got power and the ability to resist, they took it too far, and in a sense, the LTTE became the very thing that it was established to take apart.
Right.
But in order to remedy that situation, war crimes were committed against those people. Massive amounts of war crimes were committed. The civilian casualty rate was ridiculously high. I mean, granted, if we're playing the numbers perspective, no, it does not stack up against the Holocaust. But an entire civilization was decimated in the structure of the LTTE, and it was a very well-established system that is eerily reminiscent of the presence that Daesh has in Iraq and Syria. But when you introduce yourself into an environment like the Middle East, and you're trying to fucking place short-term solutions in a long-term problem. The issue with the societies over there is those societies need to learn to stand on their own too and reach out and seek that freedom that we are trying to provide for them. We're essentially doing the warfare of the analogy of taking a horse to water and trying to force it to drink. How much time, how many lives, and how much money is going to be spent taking and prepping up these societies to take off, only to be recaptured and re-enslaved by some fuckhead regime.
Yeah, by the next ISIS or the next Al Qaeda or the next Taliban. It just depends on what country you're in, I guess.
It does. But if you establish a counterterrorism task force, like we have several counterterrorism task force, and we can focus our firepower and our operations against people that are truly rising to the levels that would allow them to take over a society, and we work as a, and I hate to say it, but we work as a global community to combat that threat, that's the best way that you stop it. You cut it early. And that requires intelligence so that you can monitor, as a global community, the fucking ne'er-do-wells that are out there before they step across that line that you don't come back from. The other issue that I have, obviously, with this administration, when you set a red line, and I'll specifically call it out, when President Obama said we will not tolerate the use of chemical weapons against a society, whether or not they are in a form of resistance or not, that will not be tolerated. And then we did nothing. That royally fucking pissed me off as a warfighter. If you set the rules and you say you will do harm to those that cross those rules, you better fucking enforce it. Because believe you me, the rest of the world is watching and looking at how lenient we have become and what we are willing to tolerate as the preeminent fucking war force on this planet.
And see, I think I think anybody who's known me, especially Chris, I won't disparage anything about the soldier that's having to deal with this. The problem that I have is, how many fronts are we going to fight at one time? We cannot fight everybody. And that's what this is turning into. We've
That's
got
the
to fight
requirement.
Syria. We've got to fight Iraq. We've got to fight Afghanistan. We're going to have to fight in Iran. We might end up fighting in Pakistan. We're going to have to fight. How long can it keep going on?
That's the requirement of the global community to police global participants. You need to have those relations with foreign countries. You need to have the intelligence sharing capability with those countries so that we can monitor those threats to the point where they don't get that out of hand. Are there going to be slip-ups? Yeah. Are there going to be coups? Yeah. Is shit going to get bloody? You bet your fucking ass it does. But you know what? If we do it right and we structure it correctly, men like Chris and myself will go in there and we'll put fucking lead to head and we will remove those motherfuckers from this planet. And it will not get to the level that it has gotten to in the past.
Oh, I'm getting misty over here, Cody.
I miss you too,
Getting
brother.
misty. Cody was one of my soldiers, man. I love my Cody.
Miss you
And
too,
here's
Bob.
the thing. As you're talking about the global community, communication, intelligence sharing, we need dedicated, active ally participation in these conflicts. Europe is being over the fuck run. The thing that we're hearing the most about out of Europe, other than the several terrorist attacks that have occurred already this year in France, Germany, I mean, all of fucking Europe, the thing we're hearing the most about, other than just actual bombings, is a fucking rape epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something that we can just ignore because, oh, it's part of their culture. They're losing me, guys. They're fucking losing me on that.
So I want to caveat off of that really briefly because one of the things that was brought up by Johnson specifically within the forum was if we create the precedence that all Muslims are fucking radicalized, then we start to isolate those members from society. What we need to do in our country, and I can't speak for what needs to be done in other countries because it's not my country and I won't do that. But what we can do is lead by example, which is what any good individual will do. And we need to establish within a society the requirements of liberty provided to us within the Constitution to all those who choose to participate within our society. Now, just because there's the 10% rule for everything in life, 10% will fuck it up for the rest of the 90. But we need to be very cognizant of that because we do not want to create a fucking hate-bred society that is just ready to fucking wipe out an entire fucking group of people based off of their religion. A majority of Muslims will probably agree that due to the spotlight that is currently on their religion, it is getting bastardized. Now, what we do by establishing a society that instills liberty before any religion, it requires those religions and the societies that evolve from those religions to chime into and agree with those liberties so that we can all play together.
We've had those conversations about the assimilation and things that would be required of them of people coming here anyhow in any good immigration plan, so to speak, or reform. But on the other hand, if you look back, and it's not even just the immigration, it is the religious fundamentalism, and if you're going to ban anything, I think that's probably where you start. Look at the difference in pictures of cities in Iran in the 60s and 70s versus what they were in the 90s. And I'm sure Afghanistan had better cities than that. We know Lebanon did. Not really going any further with that, but like you said, you ask all the rest of the Muslims around where the problem lies. It's that fundamentalism. That's that twisted idea of fundamentalism. I know what it says in the book and blah blah. There are no peaceful Muslims, things like that. But not all of them are killing people. Not all of them feel provoked. The ones that are feeling provoked, like you guys have already said, they're kind of drugged up and pushed anyway.
Here's a problem, though, Steve. There's a big issue in the Muslim community with the peaceful Muslims, the ones who are not actively taking part in any of these organizations, are still willfully silent when it comes to giving up. They support these organizations sometimes with as little as their silence and their willful ignorance, but sometimes to the point of harboring them. And it all goes back to I suppose to a displeasing Allah or just your imam or something like that. But it is an issue, and one of the things that comes from isolating a group of people like that for our protection is that it also causes them to band together even more. And it's not that I disagree with it. I don't. I mean, the Japanese internment camps now sound horrible. They sound barbaric and inhumane and everything else. But if Pearl Harbor just got blown to hell and it's early 1942 and you're not yet involved in the greatest war that's ever happened, I mean, your mentality, we judge mentalities of people all the time that came generations before us and dealt with things that we haven't dealt with. We're very quick to judge that mentality. But I can't say that I would necessarily be jumping up and down and say, don't put the Japanese in an internment camp if they're telling me that this is a legitimate threat and I just saw what happened. I mean, it's a scary, touchy thing.
So I want to chime in on this because the American society is not used to war being exposed on its home front. So having been to an area that is so war-torn and so used to being at war, one thing that we need to realize within the States is when situations like that arise and those who have made themselves into citizens under a mask of participating within our free society choose to allow or to foster that, it's going to get bloody. It is. That's war.
Yeah, cannot be avoided. You're right.
It can't be, but it's one of those things that we need to deal with. But the way that you can attack that issue, you incorporate, in looking at the Muslim problem, you incorporate leaders within the Muslim community that are able to communicate with their counterparts and allow them to. Every system, as it continues through a span of time, has to adapt. And Muslim faith within this country, there are many, so many more than just the extremists that you're seeing that are willing to do that and to allow that evolution, so to speak, to occur within their faith. And we have to be able to position people in a position of leadership in order to reach out to their community to ensure that that's happening, because that's the only way that you're going to successfully incorporate anything into a society.
Yeah.
So if we take that standpoint of just fucking kick all the Muslims out, no, that's the dumbest shit that I've ever heard in my life, and it's so contradictory to the very fundamentals of this country that it makes me want to snap those people's necks fucking clean off their shoulders. So,
yeah, and I wasn't over there. I mean, I was not in the military. I worked at a small bank in DeKalb County for 2 years in right next to Clarkston. And Clarkston had the largest immigrant population per capita of any city in the U.S., and it's a tiny, tiny city. But there were immigrants from all over the world here. And there were a huge, huge Muslim population. And I know these people, and these people were my friends. And I can't speak to what they are capable of. I cannot. Because religion is a very, very powerful agent. I can't speak to them having smiled in my face one day and then their imam saying, this is your duty is to Allah is to strap this bomb to your torso and go in there and do what's demanded of you. I can't speak to that, but I can say that to just pretty much repeat what you said, to just say that you cannot be incorporated in our society, we're cutting you off. It doesn't solve anything. It only creates further issues. The issue, like you were talking about, is intelligence and aggression and going through missions from start to finish and taking care of business. And it gets bloody. It gets bloody. That's what you and Chris are there for.
the thing you have to realize is these imams that would be coming out and telling individuals to strap bombs to themselves and take out the enemies of Allah via the Westerners. Those are not imams. Those are extremists. And I can't make this distinction enough, and I will say it every time because I've just seen so many people within our society turn a blind eye to it, much in the same way that potential Muslims enable extremist activity by turning a blind eye to it. Justice requires vigilance, and it requires constant vigilance. And the only way that we are going to be able to combat that is by establishing a society in which people can freely express their religion. And when it comes to any individual that is willing to compromise that society or that individual sect of society's ability to exercise their religion, then they're compromising their very religious rights. And what needs to be understood within those sub-societies is that when you compromise the religious rights for an extremist perspective, you're compromising not only the liberty of those around you, but you're compromising your own liberty. So every time that gets propped up, every single time, the perspective needs to be a societal perspective that takes down that issue. And it's the only way you're going to combat it. And the same thing can be applied to fucking racism.
So what? Say that last part again.
The same principles can be applied to racism.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute same principles. Now Chris's experience in the military and my experience in the military were different, but I think one thing that we can understand from our perspective is, I'll run it as an analogy. In the Army, you don't see colors. I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're Asian, Hispanic, I don't care where you come from or who you call God. You are a soldier first, and that is all I care about. I care about your ability to defend those to your left and right, your ability to accomplish the mission, and your ability to improve the organization. As an American, I don't care who you call God, I don't care what color your skin is, I care about your ability to care for those citizens to your left and your right, and your ability to improve our society. And one of the fundamental things our country was founded on is mixing perspectives from across the world to ensure that we come to the best possible solutions economically, societally, and in every other aspect that we can apply.
But to that point, this is one of the things I get as a Christian. I get this crap all the time. And I'm not a fundamentalist Christian. I don't believe in the Bible as the inerrant Word of God from start to finish. But I do hear people say, well, the Bible condones killing and this, that, and the other, and it's all from the Old Testament and stuff like that. And I hear, and I know personally, a very, very fundamentalist Christians who dress as the Old Testament or the Torah told them to dress. They eat as the ancient tribes of Israel eat. And when the question is presented, well, then look in your book, and it says that if your son disobeys you, you're supposed to drag them out in front of the village, and the elders are supposed to stone them to death. Well, why don't you follow that rule? Well, there's a very quick and easy answer to that, because the society in which they live does not allow that.
Right.
And that is the big cutoff when you talk about the dangers of Islam versus the dangers of modern Christianity in the Western world. It is the recognition of the fundamentalists, the particular family that I'm thinking of. They would not do that because their law, the law of the land that they live in, says that they cannot do this. But the law is being ignored for the Islamic extremists, and therein lies the problem.
And that's the thing. You're not going to eliminate extremism.
No.
You're not. And whatever label you put on it, at the root core, it's still extremism. And what defines that is, extremism in its definition is taking something against the societal norm to dumb it down to the lowest level. So when you have individuals or a collective movement that chooses to circumvent those societal norms in the name of whatever cause you want to label it, whether it's religion, whether it's personal belief, whether it's economic dependency, whatever you want to call it. That is extremism, and it cannot be tolerated in a society where liberty is truly applied to all citizens.
Right. And I mean, if you look at Jesus Christ himself said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It lived within the rules of the society. And it's the same thing I tell to my fellow Christians when they say, and forgive me, I automatically imitate my mother whenever I think about this. Well, we just got to pray our leaders in. We got to pray for our leaders, and we got to pray them into office. No, if that was the case, if God was in charge of the leaders of this country and the governments of this country, the Son of God would have overthrown Caesar. That is a complete separate thing. The important thing is living in a society, being tolerant of those things, but living in the rules of the society. The societal rules must absolutely come first.
Yes.
If you choose to have religious rules that carry you so far beyond the societal rules, then you go to a place where you can practice that. But it is not here. And it's not in the Middle East either when you're talking about acts of terrorism and extremism. But again, you can't, like you said, you can't just unbigot people. You can't put a hashtag on Facebook, stop the hate. Well, what the hell did that do? Stop the bullies, stop the hate, stop the terrorism. I put a hashtag on, I did my part. No, you didn't.
The same reason that construct is true in society is the same reason the military only has a less than 1% population. People that are actually willing to make sacrifices for things that they believe in is small. People that are willing to do half-assed fucking, I'm going to post on Twitter. Yeah, it brings social recognition into any sort of conflict or any sort of thing that you think needs attention. And I'll applaud you for taking that effort, because that is one way to combat a threat. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, if a man is pointing a gun in your face, are you going to pray or are you going to shoot back?
Right.
That's right. Hey, guys, I hate to do it, but I've got to get up early in the morning, so I'm going to have to back out for now. I am glad we held off and did the show late. I am glad everybody watched the debate that could. It was definitely eye-opening for me. That's not how I expected to come out of it, but I'm happy with how I came out of it. So,
well, I've got 23-22, so why don't we just call it a night and cut the broadcast off?
Yep, and then you guys can stay in chat.
Yes, I'm fine with that, Chris. I do want to talk to you about some things that I thought of tonight to cover in some further episodes. So we'll take that offline.
You guys gave me a couple more too. So.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a privilege as usual. Thanks to all 5 of the viewers we had tonight. That's a big night for us. We're growing our ranks and building the Brushfire is expanding. So until next week, just remember, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, you will keep him warm for the rest of his life. Good night.